Welcome to the Andy Staples Show. This is a big day here at the show. Lots going on. We have 8 million reasons to discuss the Pusha T Filet-o-fish diss track. We have Ari Wasserman with us. We have Max Olson, the Portal Authority, with us. Ari is hot. Ari's already started writing bars for his own diss track because he has to defend the honor of the Filet-o-fish. But we have big recruiting news that is happening, and like I said, 8 million reasons to discuss Filet-o-fish, but we probably should discuss this first. 5-star quarterback from California, Nico. Oh, now I've already messed it up. Oh my God.
Iamaleava.
Practice this and I messed it up.
I wrote it phonetically on my computer because anybody listening should know that we spent 5 minutes practicing his last name as a group before we came on here. So, Iamaleava is the way that
Iamaleava. Nico Iamaleava. Listen, I got Tungo Vailoa eventually. We all did. And listen, when you listen to interviews with this guy, big Tua vibes coming off of him anyway. I heard him, by the way, committed to Tennessee, told the rival site that covers Tennessee, VolQuest, family atmosphere.
Mm-hmm. He went to their game against Vanderbilt, and he was sold ever since then.
Family atmosphere works every time. But no, this is a big deal for the old Vols because they have not gotten a quarterback of this recruiting hype caliber ever really in the recruiting rankings era. They have not gotten a quarterback ranked this high.
This is the first time I think I read a stat somewhere since 2002 that they've gotten a commitment from a 5-star quarterback.
Yeah, James Banks would have been the one back then. That was back when I was covering the team, and he didn't work out all that well. But this is a big deal for them. And look, a lot of you internet sleuths who read Stuart Mandel's story about the player who signed the NIL deal that could make him $8 million over the next few years. A lot of you internet sleuths think it's Nico. I'm just saying that. We don't know. Nobody's told us. But a lot of you internet sleuths think that.
Don't even know what you're talking about.
I just look at the comments under Stewart's story. People have connected many dots. So I'm not casting any aspersions. I think Lane Kiffin might be, since he retweeted Stewart's story like 2 minutes after the news broke.
But hey, they've been messing with how the feeds work on Twitter, so maybe Lane just finally saw that story.
He just heard about it now.
Just pure coincidence. No, I mean, look, we're not going to cast any aspersions because honestly, I don't care. Like, if they are, great. If they aren't, whatever. But if they are, or if this is the case, though, doesn't this sort of fly in the face of Alabama and Georgia and Ohio State will just get even bigger recruits than they do now? As if that's possible.
I think this is good. I think it's good. If this is the person,
if indeed,
and it turns out to shape up into the fact that a program that was once a powerhouse, and when I was in high school, Tennessee was the school, getting their first 5-star quarterback commit in 20 years, then I think this is the intended or the hopeful intended result of this. Now, the thing that I think is most interesting is whether or not the other schools that you just mentioned are going to catch up, and I have a weird suspicion. I don't have a crystal ball. I have a weird suspicion they're going to figure it out. Mm-hmm. And if they do everything else better, they're probably going to do that better too. But for the time being, if this is how it's going to play out, then what is there to be angry about? This is what's going to happen, and good for Tennessee if this is what happened. I think
well, and that's the thing. About. It's not my money, and it's a risk. But all of this is like, we're probably going to talk a little later about quarterbacks going into the NFL draft. That's a risk. Like, most of the first round quarterbacks that get taken are busts, and you pay a bunch of money and they're a bust. But that is the risk of trying to land football players as they move up to another level, specifically quarterbacks. It is a risk no matter what.
Here's the question that I have. Oh, go ahead, Max. You go.
I was going to say, I think you could look at it from the other side of that too. We can look at this and say, is any recruit worth that sort of investment, right? Just going forward, right? Is there a sum of money that is ridiculous at some point? But I think I look at the other side of that too. And I'm not trying to hate on what Tennessee accomplished here, but if you are a player that is, one of the top 3 recruits in the country, which I believe he is right now, and probably will be that way on signing day. Right. I think those 3 guys will stay at the top, I would imagine. We talked about this before with Caleb Williams, Andy, and like, what are the most important priorities for you in making the best decision so that, you can be a 3 and pro kind of player. You can be that number 1 pick or first round pick or whatever. And, I think it's a really interesting decision by Nico from that standpoint that, certainly there must be some faith that Tennessee, with him coming on board, can build the kind of recruiting class, not just this year, but going forward, a bunch of recruiting classes that puts them in contention and can also, develop him as a future, first round pick. And it's a little bit of a gamble by him when you look at the track record here of Josh Heupel and his staff.
Put a lot of and not just Josh Heupel, but Tennessee in general.
Right,
they've produced a lot of really good quarterbacks.
They've had 1 quarterback drafted in a decade, and that was Josh Dobbs. I'm sure that Josh Heupel can point to his track record and say, he coached, Landry Jones got drafted, Sam Bradford got drafted. Certainly looks like Dylan Gabriel will get drafted here, and he can point to those guys, and Drew Lock at Missouri, but it's not like a big list for him or his QB coach or OC, and so it's an interesting from that standpoint. Picking the place where you think is going to set you up best, it's a fascinating choice.
Yeah, the thing that I'm most interested in with all this is if you guys look at the way that the recruiting world kind of has shaped out the last 3 years, the opening click, I guess is how I would put it, where the 5 schools are the cool schools, and those kids that are all at these camps that are together talk about these schools, and it always seems like the same top 5s for all these top 100 players. And the question, I guess, from every other program on the outside looking in is, how do we get to sit at that cool kids table? And
this is how, because
this is why I want to ask. If you get a 5-star quarterback from California, and that legitimizes Tennessee, and then more people come in, but the money isn't there for everybody, can Tennessee still kind of annex that? Because and maybe the money will be there. I don't know how far and wide this.
That's a good question. Yeah, that is a good question, because if you want somebody else really good, and I think one of you guys was headed down this path that didn't quite get there. Does a school, and we keep saying Tennessee, but we can add some other schools into this bucket that expect to do better than they have been, have money. I would say Nebraska's certainly in this one. Arkansas is one that has a passionate fan base, lots of money, and can do this. I would think in Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Clemson, that they can take a discount, for lack of a better term. Like, they don't have to offer as much, because they can offer, we make first rounders here. Like, what's that worth to you? And it is worth a lot. But one thing I just,
but by the way, do you guys think that, so this is, as of today, it's like a verbal commitment, right? He hasn't signed a letter of intent.
Nothing.
Maybe he signed other stuff. We don't
know if anything's been signed.
But wouldn't you keep, like, if you're Dan Lanning, and I think Oregon had the crystal ball favorite before things turned here in the past few weeks. Like, if you're Dan Lanning or these other coaches, like, why wouldn't you keep recruiting this kid and trying to convince him to flip and, whatever NIL stuff's going on, that's his problem. But shouldn't you keep going after him?
Absolutely. You have until December. He has until December to decide. And, look, even if there's a deal in place, there is no deal that anybody can make that says you have to attend a particular school. So what it may mean is you don't get any money. Okay, well, somebody else will give you some. So I think that can be unwound if it needs to be. But
yeah, the question though is it's not $8 million for a quarterback. The question is whether or not that $8 million is going to be contagious in the sense that it legitimizes you as a viable option for enough recruits to make you good enough to compete at that level.
Here's my question, guys. Does Nico himself do that? Because I've been watching interviews with him and reading about him, and there is definitely a little bit of a Pied Piper vibe coming off of him. He seems like a guy guys want to play with, and like I just
like Arch Manning, just like Malachi Nelson. That's
well, I
what
went
these
back
guys
to look
are.
at I went back and looked at Tua's recruiting class at Alabama, which literally may be the best recruiting class in the history of football.
Yep.
And how much of that was guys wanting to play with Tua? I don't think it's all of that. Like, I don't know that Alex Leatherwood
But
said.
I'll tell you, Najee Harris did. That was a big part for him.
100%. But you had Najee Harris first rounder, Alex Leatherwood first rounder, Jerry Jeudy first rounder, Tua first rounder, Jedrick Wills first rounder, Devontae Smith Heisman winner and first rounder, Henry Ruggs first rounder. I mean, that's insane. That is insane. And 3 of those guys are receivers, which knowing the identity of the quarterback would certainly help.
Was that the year that they signed the greatest?
That did pretty well, Andy.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the class that had the greatest receiver class of all time, right?
Oh, I just named him. I mean, it's off
ridiculous.
the charts good. But then 2 first-round offensive tackles, also a first-round running back who is, one of the more talented backs that ever came through the University of Alabama, which is saying something. So, yeah, it is. If Nico himself legitimizes Tennessee and gets, I'm not even saying a class like this, 2 or 3 more difference makers in this class, whether that's through NIL, whether that's through they just like him and want to play, but it doesn't matter. If they go to Tennessee and not to USC, Texas, Oklahoma, Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, LSU, you name it, then that helps tilt the balance of power. That helps Tennessee down the line.
Now imagine Tennessee doing it at the same time as Arkansas and Nebraska and the 8 other schools that we mentioned on last week's show.
Right.
And then you take 2 or 3 or 4 for each of them. That's 35 more players that are going to different schools a year after 50 of the top 100 players went to 4.
That would be the ideal outcome, I think, from a competitive standpoint, because you guys help me here. What other schools are we talking about that have the wherewithal, the fan base, and that could do the passion to do this? Penn State, Michigan State certainly seem like schools.
Max, you would know this more than us, though. Like Nebraska seems to be like a major one here, right, Andy?
I mean, you saw. I think last week Casey Thompson bragged that the starters at Nebraska are making 6 figures.
Hey, you're going to be a big deal in the state of Nebraska if you start for the Nebraska football team.
And whether that's true or not, I mean, just throwing it out there gets people's attention.
Yeah. So I think Nebraska, in the Big Ten, Nebraska, Penn State, Michigan State, could Iowa do this? Would Iowa do this?
I don't know. I mean, what is this? Are we talking about what kind of, like you saw?
Get your collective going and let's go. Let's get
how what's the bar going to be? Is it going to be, as David Ubben wrote in his piece on Tennessee's collective? I mean, is the bar going to be, hey, let's get 5, 10 million, 15 million together?
So
for recruiting?
I talked to David about this when he wrote that story, and we talked about this on the show. Somebody from another school about that same time, independently of David's reporting, told me 10 million feels like the number. And that's not for a recruiting class. That is for an entire roster. 10 million a year. But that could go up. This is like we talked about with Blake Lawrence on the show last week. None of this stuff is set in stone.
No.
Like, this market is just figuring itself out.
Plus, you got the factor on inflation, guys.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right now in this economy. You know who pays the most in actual recruiting, like real recruiting expenses right now? It's Georgia football, right?
Yeah.
So like, and that number keeps going
players.
up and up and up. Yeah. So like 10 sounds cool right now to start, but that's going to go up and up and up.
Right. It'll go up until it hits a level where, because that's the one thing people seem to fail to understand here is there is not some money tree that somebody's just plucking from. Mm-hmm. Eventually, there will not be money for it. So they will hit a number that is like, nope, too rich for my blood. So eventually that's going to happen.
Well, and there's the other part of there's the expectations part of that now too. Like you said, like let's assume that Nico does have kind of that Pied Piper effect, and they bring on some more top 100 recruits in this class, right? Doesn't that sort of raise what your expectations are going to be for Josh Heupel and his staff pretty quickly here? And I'm not saying he has to be Trevor Lawrence as a freshman, but shoot, I mean, you've got a 3-year window there to really kind of put all the right pieces together, and the portal can help in terms of speeding that up too, obviously. But man, you would think once that kid's on campus, you got to get it rolling.
You guys know what strikes me as odd too, is that we spend so much time in our stories and our thought processes and our conversations in these podcasts talking about which coaches understand recruiting, which ones get it, have a hunger for it, obsession for it. And it's just like, does Josh Heupel even, if this is what we're talking about here, get the credit for that? Because it's like we spend so much time analyzing coaches and their ability to recruit and attaching that to whether or not they're right for the job. You guys remember the podcast after Dan Mullen opened his mouth when he shouldn't have after the – to me, I assigned the entire misunderstanding of what recruiting means at Florida to his ability to do the job. And like I feel like
Josh Heupel doesn't – I feel like Josh Heupel doesn't get credit for anything. And I'm saying this is unfair. Like, for whatever reason,
you're right.
People ascribe – Scott Frost set him up nice at UCF. He left him Mackenzie Milton, even though he signed Dylan Gabriel there. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, Tennessee just, Hendon Hooker turned out to be great. And
look at all the stuff you did when Lincoln got there, right? It's
right.
Like,
I'm not trying to take it away from him specifically. I'm just saying as a
coach,
I'm
just saying it's not you. It's everybody. Like, for whatever reason, there's some sort of mental block against giving Josh Heupel proper credit. We probably should stop that.
But we're talking about a recruiting class and a recruiting staff last year that was trying to flip kids from Western Kentucky. And now we're talking about signing a top 10 player nationally out of Southern California. So it's just like as it continues to progress and these collectives keep popping up in new places and money becomes more of a conversation. And if you want to throw $8 million out there as a starting point and it continues to grow, at what point do we separate, if we do at all, what the coach is doing from a recruiting standpoint and the way that we evaluate his ability to do his job? Because like now, if this is what it's going to be, it's like Josh Heupel's main job now is to manifest success with the roster that somebody else helped him put together with money that he didn't have.
This is, what this sounds a lot like is the NFL. Yeah. where if you're coach and GM or if you have Bill Belichick, it's different. He's the GM. The Patriots operate like a college team, but if your coach and GM aren't simpatico in the NFL, you have issues. Stuart Mandel and I talked about this on the phone the other day. And it's crazy because I think most college coaches are going to be in a position where the collective is going to go after who they see the coaches going after, like who they want. Who the
anybody who's
want.
blind can pick the top 100 players in the country, but we want those guys. I mean,
what if a coach is on the hot seat? And this is all purely hypothetical. I'm not ascribing this to any one school because I don't think this has happened yet. What if you've got a coach on the hot seat and whoever's in charge of your collective goes, I don't like this guy.
I don't like this guy.
I don't trust this guy. We're going to go get some dudes and he's going to coach him or not. And then you have
like, what if the collective shuts down
all over again?
What if the collective shuts down and goes, you know what, guys, we're going to take the year off until this guy's out of here. We're going to save our money for a year.
Yes.
We're not going to pay anybody a dime.
That's like an extremely SEC storyline.
Yeah,
of course that's going to happen. Absolutely.
You're telling me that LSU's not going to shut it down if things aren't working out?
You're going to shut the hose off. Yeah.
Yeah.
You got to have great alignment with your collective.
That's exactly right.
You have to have great alignment with the collective that you're not allowed to talk to directly.
That's right. But, it's like the old Parcells thing. It's like, hopefully you guys are interested in shopping for the same groceries here,
Yeah. It's funny because in the NFL, the GM can talk to the coach. They're perfectly allowed to, and sometimes they don't. Mm-hmm. Like the Jack Del Rio story.
And sometimes the head coach doesn't pick the GM, a lot of times.
But it's like, how are we even going to evaluate?
Other way around.
We're just going to evaluate, because even in the NFL, to a certain extent, coaches get, credited and dinged a little bit when they have bad draft classes. And I know it's the GM and the president and all those guys who are, all collectively doing it together. But now it's just like, are we only going in like 6 years, if this really goes off the rails and this is going to be 9 schools signing $10 million classes? Are we going to just evaluate these coaches purely on whether or not they make it past the Rose Bowl or they get into the playoff or they win their Power 5 or Power 6, whatever you want to call it at that point, conferences? Because like that to me is a completely different dynamic of the way that we even view the sport. No, it's like, am I going to get laid off? Like, is my position even a thing anymore?
Like, Alabama's expectations are different than Nebraska's expectations. Like, if Nick Saban doesn't get Alabama to the playoff every year, eventually.
I know, but if people are paying equal money, the expectations better be equal. If you're a Michigan State fan and you're a part of the collective and you shell out just as much money as Tennessee does, then you have the same reasonable expectations or the same amount as Alabama. It's all going to be dollars and cents.
Doesn't Michigan State now have the same reasonable expectations of all the top schools because of what they're paying Mel Tucker?
I mean, I think that would be
limited
fair
to players.
Yeah. And it's like, do you want to pay money to a coach to achieve a 10-2 season when that money gets you Nick Saban or Nick Saban-ish money. And it's just like, that's a very, the James Franklin deal is very interesting to me. It's like, I think we know beyond a shadow of a doubt who James Franklin is. I don't think all of a sudden Penn State's going to turn into a perennial national title contender unless somebody in East Town out there like drops a duffel bag. Well, and it's just like a very,
it would be a duffel bag. It'd be a Wawa coffee cup.
I did have to look up how much $1 million looks like in cash, and you can't fit that much in a McDonald's bag. Even the big like plastic to go ones that your Uber Eats comes through. We're talking like a big, like barrel. Like,
man, I would love to see Argy's Google history. There's got to be some insane shit.
My Google
this is the ultimate segue, gentlemen.
Rails.
We have.
Wait, hold on.
Provided, of course.
Can you just look at it? Because I'll read it to you right
now.
Can I like go look it up? Like, how do I do that? Do I just is there like a drop down menu?
There's like a. I think. Oh, that's a good question.
Okay, Wordle.
Page for it.
Nico Iamaleava. Yankees Yankees prospect, because I was in a card break earlier and I didn't know what I got. Best fast food fish sandwich, double Filet-o-fish, Elite 8 television times. What time does Chipotle open and who is Aaron Donald?
All right. We have a lot to unpack there. First of all, we'll start with who is Aaron Donald, because Jason Jinks and Mike Sando had a big story in The Athletic today about Urban Meyer's tenure. Obviously, we all covered Urban Meyer in college. We don't really believe he didn't know who Aaron Donald was. Like, that's an unfunny person trying to be funny, right? Am I wrong there?
I mean, his Fox work was out in L.A., wasn't it? Like, you'd think if you spent a little bit of time in L.A.,
how many hours of football does a random fan have to watch to know who Aaron Donald is a week?
Yeah, I think that's an unfunny person trying to be funny. Now, going up to Trevor Lawrence and talking about a receiver from Florida not knowing anything because he's from the South, that's a different story. Like, okay, what Trevor Lawrence is from Cartersville, Georgia. You've heard him talk, right?
Also, isn't Clemson a Southern school?
Last I checked.
Yeah,
I'm not
saying
very good at
Southern people are stupid to someone who sounds like Trevor Lawrence is probably not going to be received very well. And oh, by the way, the receiver did not look like Trevor Lawrence, so there's probably a lot more subtext than that.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
And Trevor Lawrence is looking at that, going, "Oh, good God, what are we dealing with?"
I don't even know what this like. What do you even say to that?
Yeah. So this is it was for the same reasons we talked about when Urban Meyer got fired, when he lit his tenure with the Jags on fire with the thing in Columbus. Like, he stepped into something that his style was not made for. And I wrote it when he got the job that he's going to have to change some stuff to make this work. He clearly didn't change any of it.
He doesn't have, I mean, you read the details in that, and a lot of them are not, they're not shocking, but they're certainly extremely disappointing. He has no stomach for a rebuild.
No.
And Ari, I know you can point to when he showed up in Columbus, and obviously the season before, wasn't great, but that was not a rock bottom rebuild at Ohio State, obviously.
Yeah, no, I think that was, I think he would have taken that job regardless, but it was certainly the best roster. I mean, it was the worst roster Ohio State had during his entire tenure, and it went undefeated. So, like, it was, certainly that's the case. And
he walked into a great situation there, and I just
Braxton Miller was the quarterback.
That's why it's hard for me to, like, there's a whole different conversation about, like, do we think someone will hire him again to coach a college team? And that's, you can go down that road, but
I don't think in the era
there's just not going to be that many
jobs.
No, I agree.
No job that he would take would consider him in the era of NIL.
We've talked a lot about college football. Obviously. I've talked a lot about Urban Meyer on this podcast, and I think it's always an interesting discussion. But you want to know what really struck me about the story more than anything, guys, and maybe you can talk about this. He was successful in college at multiple places, having a certain temperament about himself where he made people feel subservient. Yes. And he made people, this idea of, if you're not good enough to do what we need you to do, then you're worthless to me. And that's a scary thing for a teenager. And then he went into the NFL and he approached the job the same way. And if you've ever had a conversation with Urban Meyer, he's kind of a dry, sarcastic person who says things. I can hear him saying all the things that he said in the story. I don't know if he meant it from a malicious place. Maybe he did, but that's the way the man speaks. But the biggest question to me is is that a door that you have to open in terms of how unpaid athletes at all places are treated and what they have to stomach at the college level that professionals who have already made their millions of dollars just won't do? And why is it unacceptable at the professional level where people are actually being compensated for their work and acceptable at the college level?
Well,
and then
I go back to Brock Purdy on the show here a couple of weeks ago. He said it, and the way he said it, I had not heard anybody say it like that before. But we were talking about Matt Campbell and how Matt Campbell doesn't need to worry about the transfer portal because people enjoy playing for him, and he tells them the truth. And Brock Purdy goes, yeah, the transfer portal is going to expose a lot of coaches.
Yes. Yep. There is, I think, a big difference with that, Ari. And I noticed this too. Do you guys remember when John Beilein flamed out pretty quickly with the Cavs?
Cavs. Yep.
And I'm certainly not comparing the two men, but my point here would be, I think there's definitely like this sort of baked in culture of silence in college football within a locker room, within a meeting room and all that stuff where because the coach has got all that power and they can just cut you and then your career's over and yada, yada. Like people see crazy stuff in their 4 years, 5 years and don't say anything. Don't go to reporters or anything. And like very quickly in the NFL, like if you mess up, and NBA, NFL, they go to their agents and their agents go to the reporters and that stuff comes out. It's just very different. Like
and I wonder if it's
not slip up like that.
As a result of the SID culture where only 4 or 5 players at the bigger schools are talking on a given week and you have to earn your time. And there's a lot of coaches with a no freshman policy talking to the media. And then all of a sudden, you have this NIL thing come out where people are getting compensated and marketing your personality and being in front of cameras is a beneficial thing for you financially. And I wonder if college football's, silence is going to progressively get closer to the way it is in the NFL. And
I think it's going to be much closer to the NFL because listen, I think part of the reason Gary Patterson got fired at TCU last year was the way he lets his players or didn't let his players express themselves. And you never got to interview a good TCU player. Like it was never going to happen. And if I were Dave Aranda, if I were Mike Gundy, if I were anybody recruiting against Gary Patterson, I would say, look, we're going to let you be yourself here. We're going to put you out in the spotlight here. We're not going to hide you from anybody. If you want to, sell yourself, by all means.
I'm sure that's what Lane Kiffin told Zach Evans.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So it is going to be a very different time. And I think a very different coach is going to succeed. It's interesting though, because the guy we talk about all the time being the more adaptable guy, does it not seem like Nick Saban is a lot more chill than he used to be? I don't think that's an accident.
Yeah, it's true.
Guess what? Nick Saban went to the NFL and those players didn't feel like they owed him respect.
No, and did not respect him. So,
right. So it's just such a different.
Well, it's just an interesting thing.
It's interesting that gap, and yet you see these coaches. You could learn from those examples and maybe change what you're doing a little bit. But I think that in some ways, a guy like Urban Meyer is like, I'm going to go there to change the Jags. They're not going to change me.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's all about money, and on all walks of life, and you can act like it's not, but. If you got paid or your check cleared and it's your cash, then all of a sudden you have less to lose. And I think that college mentality is I can't say anything. I can't do anything until I
might lose my scholarship money. Yeah.
So now if you're paying a quarterback $8 million and he goes to Tennessee, and I don't know how the deal is going to actually be structured in that quote unquote.
If that's who it is.
If that's who it is. But like the idea is, he's not going to be silent if something goes wrong or somebody says something, off color to him or mistreats him or abuses him in any way. He has his money. He got what he needed. And, there's a certain level of, what's the word I'm looking for? Liberation or leverage that you have once you're able to be in that position.
It's a matter of value. I mean, the Jacksonville Jaguars and Urban Meyer are a good example of this. And you'll see this in college now. Like Urban Meyer thought he was the most important person in that organization. Trevor Lawrence was the most important person in that organization. It's not even debatable. It was never debatable. Once they drafted him, Trevor Lawrence was the single most important person, I guess, behind the owner. Shad Khan would be the most important. Then Trevor, then maybe Urban, but maybe not.
And just because he's under contract for a long time, that doesn't make him any less important.
Right. Because if he stops playing, that becomes a problem. He can withhold that.
And that's why he's most important, because it's the money.
Yeah.
No matter whether he's playing or not.
Well, and all the money orbits around him. And I think you may see that in college too. And I know there's some people who are going to get upset about that, but that's life. Like, that's how everything works
now, whether people want to say it or not. The 5-star Heisman finalists are the most important players on the teams that they play on. So, I mean, like,
and they always have been.
I know. I don't know why we have to, like, not us, but just people in general have to just tap dance around things that everybody knows is true. Who do you think's the most important player on every roster? I don't know. Let's go find the one that's highest on the draft boards, and we'll just circle him. Most of the time, it's a quarterback.
Yeah. Sometimes it's a D tackle. Sometimes it's amazing how it kind of works just like the draft works too. Like, here's what they consider the most important. Like, they don't take a center number one. Tyler Linderbaum, the best center to come along in 20 years. He's not going to be number one. He might be a first-round draft pick, which is pretty awesome for a center.
Next week on the Andy Staples Show, we're going to go one through every Division I team, and we're going to say who the most important person in the program is.
Oh, my God. That's a great show.
But I wonder if it would be more.
This is why we pay the big bucks. Sorry,
it would be more
content machine
coach in college than the NFL, though. I think coach would probably be the most.
Now, did we do like our friends on Pardon My Take? All best player, most important player. The joke where you have the obvious best player, but you want to sound somewhat contrarian. So like, but that's the glue guy, the most important player.
Yeah.
But no, I think that's a great idea, and I do that should be a set of shows next week, not just a show. I think that should be a set of shows where we break down some of the best teams in the country and who the best players are, who the most important players are. I think that's a fine idea.
At the college level, because their careers are so brief, I don't know that a player would ever supersede the value of the coach.
No,
unless the coach is not very good, and in that case, they're not.
There is a time element to it. Like, and it's funny. We just mentioned Urban Meyer, the guy who probably had the most swing, whatever you want to call it, stroke at a college as a player in the last 20 years was Tim Tebow.
Guys, there are some situations where the QB is way more popular than the head coach.
That's true. Would Kenny Pickett have been more popular than Pat Narduzzi last year? No, everything was going well.
I think we kind of saw it with Sam Ehlinger, didn't we?
They
put him front and center because that was the guy everybody rallies around.
If you go down and look at the list of the top 10 in the college football playoff poll, the week that they announced the Final Four, and you added the Final Four teams and then the 6 that finished below. You guys know how a top 10 works. Do you think
interesting concept? Keep going.
Yeah. I've got you, don't I? Do you think that any single one of those programs would have a person in that program? And even if you wanted to include the athletic director or administrators that are in that, or boosters, I mean, you could do the whole net. How many of those programs that were very good this past year have a person in that program that's more important than the head coach? I bet you it would be 0.
I bet you'd be right, but because that does signify stability, and that probably, because like in the NFL, a really good quarterback, that's a 15-year employee. So you do want, and you've seen it with Aaron Rodgers and the Packers, the friction where Aaron Rodgers didn't feel like he had enough say.
There's probably only one coach in the NFL that's the most important person in their franchise.
Right, Bill
and I would
Belichick.
say that'd be Belichick.
Right.
But and some people would argue that Brady was, and I think most people at this point would argue that Brady was more important of those two.
During a long period of time. I bet you that's true. Yeah.
So, but in college, you're right, because the best players are only there 3 years. You don't want a situation where somebody who's only going to be there for 3 years and probably only going to be super productive for 2 of those has more stroke than the head coach. That's probably a sign of a bad program.
Well, do you think that's possible at Tennessee?
Again, you're not giving Josh Heupel enough credit.
No, I'm just asking. Is that possible?
Josh Heupel some credit.
No, we're just talking perception. We're just talking
perception. Talking here, guys. I mean, what are we doing?
We don't know. This is the other part of this. Anybody that tells you this is what's going to happen with these situations with NIL is lying or guessing, because nobody knows what's going to happen. I have no idea what will happen when somebody who has a big NIL deal coming in gets on campus, and then maybe isn't as good as they're supposed to be, or isn't quite ready to play, or the coach just feels like they've got somebody else who's better. This is going to happen, but none of us
anybody
knows
like
what will happen when it does.
Going into September last year, did anybody make more money than Spencer Rattler?
Nope.
You know what I mean?
Benched.
So like stuff happens.
Yep. And that's the other piece of it is you are going to have people who make money. I mean, you have people who make money with commercial. Jimmy Garoppolo's got a Subway commercial now.
He's very handsome.
He's still probably not going to start for the 49ers next year.
He's a very handsome man.
He is incredibly handsome.
Stafford got an AT&T commercial too. Yeah, these guys are. Their NIL's doing
That's
well.
Stafford's acting chops. He's really good in that commercial.
Pretty good.
Really
I mean,
good.
if you watch the tournament, you had to see it 20 times, so we could really break it down.
Although I do think Baker Mayfield's acting ability has hurt him. Like he's so good in those progressive commercials that it just makes people mad now when he's not playing that well. And I know he's playing hurt most of last year. So we'll see where maybe Baker Mayfield's going to be a Falcon now with Deshaun headed to the Browns and Matt Ryan headed to the Colts. But could be our old friend Marcus Mariota.
He's ready to go. Yeah.
Baker is definitely in the portal right now. Yeah,
that's exactly right. All right, we have to get to the big news of the day, though. We talked
it's insane. We made people listen to this for 36 minutes before we got to
the important
how my blood pressure is right now.
Well, get ready; it's about to go higher, ladies and gentlemen. Pusha T.
I'm the reason the whole world love it. Now I gotta crush it. Filet-o-fishes, then you should be disgusted. How dare you sell a square fish, asking us to trust it? A half slice of cheese, Mickey D's on a budget. Arby's crispy fish is simply it. With lines round the corner, we might need a guest list. Eggs is stage left, the sandwiches taste fresh. A little cube of fish from a clown is basic. Say less, this argument is baseless. Drowned in tartar, that Filet-o-fish is tasteless. See, Arby's only deals in the greatness. I bet the house on it like it's Vegas. Look, I could sell water to a well. How could you ever think I'd fail? Yeah, the crispy fish sandwich blazing trails. The mother clown's just too frail. Yeah, if you know me and you know me well, our fish is gonna tip that scale.
Ari, do you feel personally attacked?
I just was listening to the lyrics. Yeah, I do.
This is why he put Drake in a body bag the last time they had a little diss track off.
Let me say this before you go. If we're going to air an entire Arby's ad on your podcast, I pray to God that they start sponsoring this so Ari has to do Arby's ad reads on your podcast.
Yes, let's make it happen.
What's hilarious too is if you look at the Athletic logo that's on the bottom left corner of our screen here. I don't know if you've been to Arby's, but they wear visors. And the A is really, really small on their visors, and it's identical to RA. Mm. And like I've almost bought. I went to the Arby's because we don't have a merch store. I almost went to the Arby's website to buy Arby's hats because I thought but then I maybe would be Arby's. So listen, I really like Arby's. I think that their beef and cheddar is amazing.
Curly fries are outstanding too.
Sure.
Yeah, so we can do a random ranking of potatoes.
But
I think.
How do you trust a square fish? That's genius. That's
only assuming that you think the fish
the best
is smaller than the
since Hit 'Em Up. Good Lord.
I almost said something inappropriate on here. I've got to control myself because we're talking about diss tracks here, but there's no question in my mind that you do who's paying you, right? Like Dave Chappelle used to say, if Pepsi's paying me, then I'm drinking Pepsi, and if Coke's paying me, I'm drinking Coke.
But the backstory of this is tremendous because apparently Pusha T and his brother wrote the McDonald's "I'm Loving It" jingle, and it's sort of like the lady who made the swoosh for Nike, where they just didn't get paid very much for it, didn't have the rights in perpetuity, didn't sync up their rights, and he said it taught him a valuable lesson from a business perspective. But there's you can feel legitimate hatred for McDonald's in that ad.
Can you you two just look at me in the eyes and explain to me why it took two people to write I'm loving it? Like who did the part?
It worked.
I don't know.
I'm not arguing with it.
Like
maybe one person did the and the other one did I'm loving it.
Yeah.
Now, Ari, there's a specific criticism levied in this rap that I would like you to address. I'll level with you guys. I'm pretty sure I've never had a Filet-o-fish in my life. Okay. And
What?
just have it. So help the public understand. Now, look, I thought about this at about 12:20 today when we were talking about this. I thought maybe I should go pick up one of each and try this and give kind of an honest assessment. But then I realized,
like
look, that's not how I'm trying to lose 60 pounds like Andy. Okay, so that's not the way Andy lost his 60 pounds by doing a McDonald's, Arby's.
That's also why I don't have any fish sandwiches in front of me as we speak, because I thought the same thing.
That's right. So explain to me, Ari, why do they put cheese on a fish sandwich?
Do you like melted cheese?
Generally, yes. But how does that improve that sandwich?
Because melted cheese.
I don't know. Just answer, help me understand it.
Yeah. I know. He's like making fun. Like, is there no cheese on the?
Didn't look like it.
There's no cheese. It looks like there's a.
The thing
looks like
how important is the cheese to you on the sandwich? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Here's my sandwich. When I order a Filet-o-fish, I go up to the window. I say I'll have a Filet-o-fish, fresh steamed bun, extra cheese. So it's very, very important.
Extra cheese. Okay.
Yeah, because the one thing he did say was true is that there's just a small square. I like to have a little bit more, but I like Filet-o-fish isn't the only fish sandwich with cheese on it. I'm like looking at
the Arby's fish sandwich is hanging off the bun, and I'm looking at a photo of an Arby's fish sandwich with cheese on it. Now, it certainly seems like that's an option. Arby's
also, if it's so offensive, you can just say no cheese. Yeah. So, it's
now you can get cheddar at Arby's because obviously the beef and cheddar. So instead of American cheese, you can go with cheddar. I do like the spiciness. They have a Nashville hot fish sandwich. That sounds outstanding. I'm going to go no tartar on any of this, by the way. I hate tartar sauce. It's
you've never had nautical cousin, Max, and he doesn't like tartar sauce. So why am I even on the show right now? I don't understand what's going on.
But here's the thing about the and this is where Arby's and Pusha are geniuses. The Arby's Filet-o-fish one hangs off the bun. Now, I'm curious if we compare bun sizes, is the Arby's bun a little bit smaller? Because they'll game the system a lot of times with that.
Mm-hmm.
But it hangs off the bun.
Double Filet-o-fish too, so
it is asymmetrical. The asymmetry matters here. This is one of the few times in design where asymmetry beats symmetry.
So does the square thing gross you guys out? Does the fact that it's square bother you?
It makes it untrustworthy. There are no square fish.
It's wild caught Alaskan pollock. Now go Google Alaskan pollock and tell me.
Are they square?
Show me one video of them actually wild catching pollock. Give me
it's wild caught, bro. I mean, advertising. Let me ask you this. Is the fish smaller than the patty?
Is the fish smaller than the patty? That's a good question.
Who cares what the shape is? The only thing I would be concerned about is if the patty is bigger than the fish.
I Googled pollock, and all I got are Jackson Pollock painting images.
It's wild-caught Alaskan pollock.
Okay, now, that fish is not square, Ari. Not square.
It doesn't have to be square. You can cut anything out of anything.
I know. You
Wendy's hamburgers are square. Does that mean that the cow is square?
but I have formed a beef patty. I have never formed a fish patty.
Well, you got something.
When I have eaten fish myself, and I have cleaned fish myself.
So here's what I'm going to say about.
I just
shape.
We cut the fillet,
and this is the thing that I'm most passionate about here.
Okay,
we are talking about a fast food fish sandwich. So if you're concerned about what's in it, or how fresh it is, or what the shape of the patty is, or where it came from, then you're eating at the wrong freaking place anyway. So like, if you're worried about that, like Max used to send me Instagram videos of local restaurants in Omaha or Lincoln. I don't know which one.
Yeah, Block 22
of making fresh made fish sandwiches that
Block
absolutely looked amazing and probably are better than the Filet-o-fish, and it's probably in a $12 or $13
4 times as much.
Yeah.
Have you ever gone to a super nice restaurant that had a fish sandwich on the menu?
I mean, I'm a fish and chips. I love fried fish.
Sure.
So like it's not that the only fish that I enjoy eating is the fried McDonald's variety. All I'll say is that regardless of what's in it or what's on it, I don't think about that stuff when I'm driving through a drive-through window, which is part of my problem. So if you're criticizing the ingredients or you think it's gross or whatever, then don't go there at all. Like, what do you think is in their beef? You think it's like some sort of, it's all crap. I mean, your health is
Yeah, I don't think they're going to sponsor us now. Okay.
Yeah, well, I mean, we
were going to get a McDonald's sponsorship, but not now.
We're heading that way.
Like, you
Good
can't
Lord.
just go to a fast food restaurant and
You're supposed to say nice things about it. We said it. We teed it up for you.
Okay.
To say nice
It's
things
the most
about
delicious
McDonald's.
sandwich in fast food. It tastes amazing.
I don't know how we haven't gotten to this sooner. Now, Ari, one of the first things you said to us, and I think even tweeted when this came out, is you've had both, right? You've had an Arby's fish sandwich. You've had a McDonald's Filet-o-fish. So paint us the word picture of what the difference is.
So like the McDonald's one feels more processed. So like that to me is not helping people. But the McDonald's,
we are really not getting that McDonald's sponsorship now.
No. But it tastes better. It's softer. The texture's better. The tartar sauce is better. There's a lot of lettuce on the other one. I mean, and they're all good. Like if there was an Arby's fish sandwich in front of me, I would eat it. But if you had to pick between the few, like Arby's fish sandwich tastes identical to me to the Burger King fish sandwich and the Wendy's fish sandwich. There's too much lettuce and there's too much stale, not very good buns. And like the bun of the Filet-o-fish sandwich is like 80% of the pool here, guys. Like, I mean, if you can get
Bill Landis, his secret to happiness, when we were doing that on the podcast, when I was asking everybody the secret to happiness, he had the best one. Order good bread.
His bio on
upgrade
Twitter
your
is
bread.
Bill Landis, Ohio State beat reporter, pass the bread. Like, so, I mean, all I want you to do, because it's like really hard to explain it without sounding like I'm making fun of them. I genuinely love the Sandwich Max. I want you to go to McDonald's and just eat one.
Okay.
And make sure that the bun is fresh.
Yep.
And if you like cheese, get the cheese. The tartar sauce is delicious, and just take a bite out of a very fresh one. Now, the one thing I'll say about McDonald's is that if you are unfortunate and you get a bad batch of it, because like I can look down and say this one has been laying out a little bit too long.
Right.
The
You're like Napoleon Dynamite
ruined.
at the 4-H
fair.
There's a spectrum of
judging
quality.
the milk.
You have
this Filet-o-fish got into an onion patch.
I think McDonald's has the best menu items of all fast food, but I also think that the variability of the freshness is the highest. Like the quality control there is bad. But for the most part, when you get a fish, it's really, really good. So, I mean, I think that Culver's has a tremendous fish sandwich. I think that there's a few other ones in fast, but I've eaten like a White Castle fish sandwich. So like I've made my way through. Nobody has eaten more fast food fish sandwiches than me.
Well, and we're in like the Lent fish menu season right now, right?
Yes, which is probably why they dropped this.
Yeah, right. What if In-N-Out did one, Ari?
It would probably be fresh and delicious.
Do you think it would be the best of all? I think it probably would be. I would get.
No.
Yeah.
You know what the best one would be? If the Brain Trust in Atlanta got together and was like, just for this season, we're going to become fish fillet. Can you imagine the lines around the block for that?
Yeah, and it's just like they're all kind of the same. Like the Long John Silver's is actually a very underrated restaurant, and I don't go there very often because I feel terrible after I eat it. But if you've ever had like their dish is pretty good for fast food fish, but they also do their chicken tenders.
Ari, listen, Ari, we would like people to advertise on this podcast. Your style of I love this place, but it sucks. Really does not work.
Suck. Dude, I'm like the #1 Filet-o-fish ambassador. I have a hat in the other room, and I should have worn it for this podcast. It's a Filet-o-fish bucket hat delivered directly to me with 25 coupons for free filet.
Look,
I'm
Andy,
an ambassador.
Since we've already burned all the bridges, I do want to ask him. So, what's the worst one you've had?
They're all okay. I really don't like the Burger King one.
They're all the best and they're all the worst. When you think
they're
about
all
it.
fine. McDonald's is tremendous. Burger King's is just kind of dry and gross.
Okay.
And Burger King is the bottom barrel of fast food for me anyway. I do think that the Culver's as a entire restaurant chain is the most underrated chain there is because they're tremendous food.
Yeah.
And I'm the kind of guy that always has a fish sandwich. So I just want you to have one. And like one of my buddies never had one, and then he heard the show a year ago and he had one, and now he gets them all the time. So I do think that you'll be like, and if you're not a fish tartar sauce person, then you're not going to be because of the flavor.
I think I can handle the tartar part. Again, for some reason, I just feel like the American cheese doesn't belong on there.
Yeah, well, then get it without it, and then maybe you'll enjoy it more. There's no possible way that you can convince me because something's bigger that it's always better. And if you are, because like there's no question that the Filet-o-fish is the smallest version of the fish sandwich. But like I'm just like thinking too. We did our sandwich draft, Max. Can you imagine Like
my
if you
God.
showed me that video in 2019, like what, like the world, like what?
Oh, Andy, you would have
the
loved
fact
this
that
draft.
The fact that this video even exists blows my mind. It's like of all the things that anybody in fast food could have been made a diss song about, this is the first fast food. It's the Filet-o-fish is the target. And it's not, I mean, it's not good. And
it's so good.
you also, when you go to places too, you get what they're known for or what they're good at. And, you know, some of these restaurants,
Arby's, they have the meats.
You know, Arby's has a tremendous roast beef and cheddar sandwich. So if you go through Arby's and I've done this before, but because I like want to make sure that the Filet-o-fish is still king, you know, and it is. But I'll never order that there again.
I love how you're just taste testing, you're air checking the sandwiches at all times.
If somebody has a new fish sandwich, I'm going to try it just to make sure that the Filet-o-fish is still king and there's no better sandwich.
That's reasonable. I have to know, what were you doing when this diss trap dropped?
I had just finished a workout, believe it or not.
Okay.
And I got home
because this was just such a blindside hit on you on a Monday morning.
I was enjoying my day. You know, we got a lot of work to do before we had the podcast. I was thinking about the Big 12. Because I think we're going to be talking about that in the future on the show. And it's just like, then somebody sent me this text and I go on and I was like, what is this? But it is like my personal quest too. And if you Google like fresh Filet-o-fish, you can get a good look. The buns are steamed and they're soft and they're delicious. And I just like want you to try it. And if you don't like it, then you don't like it. You know, I mean, I can't change everybody's mind, but if you're a Filet-o-fish fan, then you probably agree that it is the best fish sandwich. And if you don't like fish sandwiches, you're not going to eat them anywhere. So, you know, and if you're really hungry, get the double because they'll stack them on there for you.
We all need to watch The Ladies' Man again because it is the greatest opening line. Hey, sweet thing, I'm going to buy you a fish sandwich. That's how Ari landed his wife. That's how Ari became the world's foremost expert.
Britt was mortified when she found out that I love this sandwich.
I'm sure she was. She's a woman of class and taste, except in men.
I'm just scrolling through my Twitter here, and this is a targeted ad. You know, these things are always listening to us, right? And they know how to get us. I'm scrolling through my Twitter. I don't like follow McDonald's or anything, right? But I've just been hit with a promoted ad from McDonald's. No one kind of likes the Filet-o-fish. It's an all or nothing sandwich.
I'm in on that.
It was an ad for a 2-for-6 deal here. So,
there you go. Well, you know who hates
get one today? Or are you dieting?
we can do one this week. Yeah, we can do one this week.
Nothing tastes as good as skinny feels, Max.
I want you to go now. And
all
you
right,
can
Max
have a Filet-o-fish sandwich.
The next
time I'll go get one. Let's do it.
The next time we have Max on the show, he will have eaten a Filet-o-fish and will report back, unless we happen to be recording 2 shows back to back. And we would never do such a thing.
How about this too?
Then you're gonna have to wait 2 shows.
No, just give me a 20-minute intermission here, and I'll go get a sandwich.
I honestly will. I'll Venmo you, and I will. Before you eat it though, you have to send me pictures of it because I can't have you.
You gotta tell me if it's like 0 to 10, like what.
Yeah,
what
I'll be like, that's acceptable.
Here.
All right, guys. All right, Wednesday on the Andy Staples Show, Big 12 job rankings, the new Big 12, not the old Big 12, and Max Olson reviews the Filet-o-fish. We'll talk to you then.